Welcome, everybody. My name is Cem Aşık. I'm the moderator of this panel. First of all, I want to thank you all for reserving your time and attending. I also want to thank the organizers, Emine and Aga, for this comprehensive event in these difficult times. We had 3 days full of panels on different topics. Most of them. I also want to thank the organizers, Emine and Aga, for the feedback. I'm just kidding. Most of them addressed current and important issues, and some of them offered a couple of solution proposals. As the closing panel of the event, I hope this panel will have some futuristic aspects and unearth some ideas to think about. Half of our panelists are from Germany, and the other half are from Turkey, including me. That's actually 2.5 people, but we can count Mr. Gündüz as half the time in Turkey and the rest in Germany, so we can split them half to half. And Mr. Servet Gündüz is one of the founders of Pure Energy with us today. We also have Mr. Holger Lichtschläger, Managing Director, and Dr. Armin Ardone, Partner of Global Experts Energy Consulting. And last but not least, we have Mr. Ozan Korkmaz, one of the founding partners of A+ Energy. I won't go into the individual backgrounds one by one, but I can say that all of our panelists have in-depth experience in market analysis, price forecasting, energy trading, and investment decisions. First, we shall have a presentation prepared by Global Experts Energy Consulting, which will provide us a glance to the future developments and price expectations in Turkish power market, and will be presented by Dr. Armin Ardone. Afterwards, we shall elaborate on a couple of relevant topics, but it will be the best to directly answer your questions. So please write down any questions you have to the chat tab on the right of your web page, and we'll try to pick and answer as many of them as possible. Dr. Ardone, the stage is yours. I think, Holger, you disappear.
Thank you very much. So there is no technical problem. Holger just disappeared to make it possible to share the screen. And I think I'll get the access just in a few seconds. Let's see if it works now. Thank you very much. Yeah, I can share the screen. So let's see if that works. I hope you can now see a screen.
Yes, now we can see.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the feedback. So, my name is Armin Ardone. I'm with Turkish Energy now for about 5 years, but I'm in the business for about more than 20 years. And I'm going to do a short presentation. It's only 10 minutes, so I'm really rushing a little bit through the slides. Don't get me wrong on that, but if there are any questions, I'm quite sure you can ask them in the chat or get in touch with Pure or Geek, also in the later stage. I'm going to discuss a little bit about the so-called price rediscovery in the Turkish market. So I'm going to present some scenarios for the price development in the next 2 decades. First of all, who are we? Very, very short. You heard the 2 names. It's Pure Energy, which is the local expert, and Geek, which is providing mostly the long-term view and modeling expertise, as well as a consultancy background for investors to support them with various risk and investment decision topics. Pure Energy provides hands-on advisory on a market structure and design and prices, as well as trading and origination in the energy and DNA. Sorry, they are operating about 2,000 megawatt of a virtual power plant fleet, and as you might know, they are a pioneer in sustainable energy production and services in the Turkish market. So a few sentences to how we are modeling the market. It's, of course, only a few minutes that we have, so I will be very brief here. We operate a multi-region model that covers the whole European Union, of course, including also Turkey and other countries which are not part of the European countries, but linked via NTC. Within this study, we've done an individual model run for the Turkish market. Our time horizon goes from 2060 typically to 2040 or 50, depending on how clients require us to do the modeling. We model the market with an hourly granularity for each and every hour until the last year. We have, of course, all the technical details needed to model an energy market. So for the conventional plants, a lot of technical data, of economic data, plant-by-plant approach. Renewables are aggregated by zone or country. And it is a fundamental model. So a price in the end is the result of people bidding into a market. And if there is enough supply and ample supply, these bids will be quite close to the short run marginal costs of the last plant or most expensive plant needed. Of course, in a tight situation, there is something like a risk premium. Some people call it markup, which reflects the tightness, but is not to be confused with market power. It is a fair representation of a scarcity. And this is, of course, something that is part of the modeling. It's a market clearing approach. So if there are more than one countries connected, there is trading ongoing, and one model run, it's about some billions of trades until we got the time span discussed before modeled in this detail. The new build decision can be based on economic evaluation, or it can be done based on a capacity balance. So a capacity is set by its requirements in the market. In our study here, we just have two very short scenarios, very important. All of them consider Turkey to be an energy-only market. We also consider that this so-called risk premium, which in other markets, let's say France or Germany, can end up with prices of 2,000 or 3,000 euros per megawatt hour, is limited in the Turkish market. And also very important to understand the results, we assume that the gas price rationale relevant for the gas-fired power plants, here we see a shift from today's blending approach with contract prices and spot prices to a mostly spot-driven market. Scenario A is based on an international widely used study regarding gas prices, and we don't introduce a carbon market. Scenario B, we increased the prices slightly to go to the higher level of actually also published for other studies. But also we introduce a carbon market. So in very brief, this is the setting, and I will now show you some of the results of this analysis. First of all, this is the capacity development. This time it's the result of an energy balance. So the capacities are either set by political targets, which is the case for the renewables. You can see on top the two light blue and a little bit darker blue bars, which is the capacity for PV and wind, which, by the way, increases significantly in the time horizon. Still, it is a little bit adjusted to reflect market conditions, so it's maybe not fully in line with the published target, but this has been inspired by the targets. As discussed in the session before, there is no hard coal additions in the future, except two known projects which are under construction, very small ones. So the hard coal capacity then will phase out over time. For lignite, there is some replacement of older plants in the 30s. And in these scenarios here, we see that there is the site of Akuyu, where 4 nuclear units will be introduced in our time horizon. So that is the assumption of this scenario. Any other capacity required to have a stable system operation is only gas-fired in this scenario. It can be open cycle gas turbines, or it can be combined cycles. The combined cycles also deliver significant amount of energy, while the open cycle gas turbines mainly are used for security of supply. And also, coming back to the discussion in the previous session, partially they can be replaced also by batteries. I will comment on that on the next slide. And the next slide just shows the energy. It didn't move. Okay, now, so here you can see that we still assume a strong growth in the Turkish energy market, strong compared to many other, especially Central European markets. However, it is a lower growth than in the last decade. Still, you can see it's going to about more than 550 or roughly 550 terawatt hours in this time horizon for 2040. You can see again the two light blue colors on top, which is the renewables. They really increase significantly and provide a significant amount of emission-free generation, as well as hydro, which is on the bottom, and the Akuyu side. There is, however, still remaining fossil generation in this scenario. Remember, this scenario does not introduce any CO2 trading. And you can also see that the gas-fired generation is increasing. The share in the last year of the time horizon is roughly 20%. So let's look about what does this mean for the prices. You can see three graphs here. On the left-hand side, you can simply see the baseload prices. They are in euro. You can see a nominal price, which is the light blue on top. It reaches about a level of 70 euro per megawatt hour for the base. If you consider this in real euro money, 2020, it amounts about 50 euro. And you can see that there's a growth phase in the beginning, mainly dominated by changes in the fuel prices. And in the middle part, you can see the price duration curves. You can see the years 2025, 30, and 40. And you can see that there is some hours where there is a price spike. Still, compared to some Western European countries, the spike is rather moderate. It reaches levels of about 250 euro per megawatt hour in a few hours of the year. Then you can see in the year 2040, which is the dark blue line, there is a little bit a kink, which is about 500 hours. And these 500 hours actually are set by open cycle gas turbines. Alternatively, a part of it could also be replaced by batteries. And then there is this very, very long, comparably flat period. Keep into consideration the axis goes to 250, so it is not as flat as it looks, but it is all dominated by gas-fired generation, which is what you can see on the right side. You can see what is the price-setting technology, and the dominating technology in this time frame definitely is the combined cycle or gas-fired power plants. Although in the last 2 years, you can see the light gray bar, and the light gray bar represents the gas turbines. This is in hours when there is not much infeed of renewables. Still, the demand is high, so we have a high residual load. And in these cases, gas turbines for a few hours in a year are operating. You can see it's about 500 hours. Again, part of it can be easily replaced by batteries, assuming that the cost of batteries really go down, as discussed in the previous panel. Nevertheless, some of these periods might be longer. And of course, if the period is 8 hours in a row, it can be challenging for batteries to have such large energy volumes ready. So a part of it, at least in our point of view, is economically to be built by open cycle gas turbines. What does it mean for the economics of a new combined cycle? You can see here the contribution margin. It's the earnings in the market. It's only the earnings from the spot market, which you can see. And you can see blue bars, which is what is possible to earn in the market. And there is this dotted line on top, which is assuming $750 per kilowatt for a new combined cycle and an efficiency of 60%, the needed market price. Not the price, but the earnings in euro per kilowatt and year. And you can see that it is challenging for new additions. In the early years, it is less challenging. And the reason is that there are still a decent amount of less efficient power plants in the market. But as they leave the market bit by bit, in the later years, all the new gas-fired generation has comparably high efficiencies. So the margin that a new combined cycle can earn is not enough. And we need a an answer to that. It is the famous missing money. I think also in previous session, this was a topic. There are many solutions to that. If you want to stick to an energy-only market design, which many countries discuss and still believe it is one of the possible solutions, you definitely need higher risk premiums in the range of 2,000–3,000 euros for maybe 50 hours of a year. That can be one answer. And of course, capacity mechanisms, also discussed in previous panels, could be an answer to make sure the missing money is covered so that we have a stable system operation. A very quick look in the last few seconds to the second scenario B. Remember, we had higher gas prices and we introduced a carbon trading in this. The light blue graph on the left side, which is again the base price in nominal terms, now reaches a level of about 110 euro per kilowatt hour. And compared to the 70 without carbon trading, this is a significant increase. The basis here is about 70 euro per ton of carbon in the year 2040. And it was introduced step by step with a level of about 30 euros in the early years. The earnings of the combined cycle in early years improves a bit. Again, very simple. We still have some less efficient power plants in the market. And if they have the high gas price and the burden of CO2 for a new combined cycle, in those hours where they are setting the price, there is an additional margin to be earned. Later on, unfortunately, this benefit again fades because most of the power plants setting the price have a comparably high efficiency. Just for illustration, there is also a look at renewables investment. To be fair, this is a really optimal and excellent site with about 3,000 full load running hours. You might find some of those, but they are not very, but they might not be the average. And in this scenario with high gas price and carbon price introduced, you can see that there is an interesting economic situation. The blue bars are higher than the dotted line. Of course, looking to studies for Central European countries, which we also do a lot, the economics in later years typically reduce significantly because of the famous effect of cannibalization. If there is too much renewable production in some hours and there is not enough battery capacity, then of course the prices might collapse to zero. And unfortunately, there is a strong correlation. Always, if there is a lot of generation, this means most of the volume is generated, the prices are low. But you don't see this in our scenario in the Turkish market. Remember, the renewables, at least the volatile ones, PV and wind, went up to like 20–25% at the end of our time horizon. You might imagine that there could be even greener scenarios in the future. But of course, this is just two very short examples of scenarios that we provided. And if you're interested in more, then please raise the question in the chat or contact us. And that's all from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Armin, for the excellent presentation. And Holger, please come to the meeting. Dr. Ardoni, so while it's hot at the moment, I'll first ask you a question. If we look into the price expectations you presented, how do you see the chances for future investments in the Turkish power markets, especially from the foreign investors' point of view? And do you have proposals other than the capacity mechanism to fix the missing money problem?
I think you already gave the answer to the first question. So the investment situation depends on to have a solution. There are many solutions. You can go ahead as other markets also decides. Currently, also Germany is definitely lobbying for an energy-only market designed long-term. Of course, it is riskier from an investment point of view because you need at least some tightness in some years. Cold winters, maybe hot summers. If they don't materialize and you are waiting for the price spikes to recover your fixed cost, then of course this can be very challenging. the introduction of capacity mechanism, there are many models. I'm quite sure you know about the capacity auctions, you know about systems in France where the clients themselves have to take care for energy and for capacity. So there's not one best system. All these systems can lead to a solution. Of course, you need to, again, as discussed in previous panels, look at the details of the regulation to make sure there are no loopholes that either can incentivize some people to get free lunch. On the other hand, there needs to be enough security for the investors to make sure this is an investment case. And as also said in the previous panel, a very important point is to have a stable currency exchange rate. But I think this is just a matter of time to go back to that again.
Okay, thank you very much for all the excellent information. Do you want to add something, Holger?
No, not necessarily. I'm fine.
Okay. Then I want to return and ask Mr. Ozan Korkmaz further elaborate on the same topic, because you also have been working on different future generation mix scenarios for different organizations, institutions. How do you see the price developments based on those scenarios? Are there any points in your conclusions that are different than the presentation? By the way, there is a comment from one of our audience, Mr. Bilal Müftüoğlu. He said EMBA coal power plant 1.3 gigawatts will be in service at the end of this year. So,
Yeah, that's right. At the end of this year or beginning of next year. Thank you, Mr. Armin. Thank you for the presentation. It is good to see similar models that we have been doing maybe for 10 years now for the Turkish market. What I want to mention is that we also see similar. You know, we also think like in the upcoming years there may be a need for open cycle gas turbines, flexible gas turbines, unless battery cost or storage cost decreases to a point it makes them more feasible than open cycle gas turbines. Also, we see that the upcoming years in the short term, let's say not in the short term, but in the next 3-4 years, there may be a price increase because of the fuel price developments. Also, after COVID, the demand effect that we all would like to have. So we also foresee a similar rise in the prices. Also, for CCGTs, of course, there's a missing money for the upcoming years. And I don't know if even with the capacity market, it can be a case. But how we model is a little bit different. This price rationale that Mr. Armin mentioned was our price rationale also something like 3 years ago. After 2018, when the ancillary services mechanism changed in Turkey and how a PH calculates the price, we changed our rationale from a short-run marginal cost plus risk premium methodology then to a strategic bidding and APH own optimization. So we find the prices based on APH own optimization model by making the power plants bid strategically in the market. So sometimes short-term marginal cost is not the price that we foresee, and our price duration curve can be a little bit different than what was presented by Mr. Armin. So that is maybe the only part that we may differ, and that is something unique to the Turkish market, I think, because of the ancillary market design. That is something that I would like to mention. Also, for wind power with a carbon market, we see there are always feasible. Even there is no feed-in mechanism, feed-in tariff or feed-in premium. Solar and wind power plants are the price for them, the captured price, let's say, for them, can be always higher than the levelized cost of electricity for them. So we also add a lot of new renewables to the system, which creates a flexibility problem for the Turkish market. And because of this, we see higher open cycle gas turbines before 2030, unless, as I mentioned, for batteries, the cost of batteries. If the cost of batteries decreases, then there may be, we may see batteries more than open cycle gas turbines. It is also according to the price of the gas, by the way. So there are many scenarios. Last but not least, it's very good to see other models and to see our model to be in line with these gentlemen's models who are also international and from Germany, maybe, I think, more experienced than me. This was my PhD thesis. This was my PhD topics also. So very glad to see you. I think we can have discussions in the near future for these topics. And also one more thing that I see very important is, let me tell this. When we were first doing this price forecasting in years 2011, 12, 13, I was always mentioning that the most important forecast, the most important parameter to forecast was spark spread. And at that time, international models, unfortunately, forecasted the spark spreads very high, resulting on this today's oversupply of capacity. So when we started doing this in 2011, 12, 13, we said there is no spark spread. We don't see that spark spread in the upcoming years. And we actually made 4 CCGT investors not to invest, not to continue, to make no-go decisions. But already many of them had decided to go and invested a lot. They couldn't go back, and those power plants are online now. They are in operation. At that time, we always say there will be overcapacity, there will be overcapacity. And what we were signaling was for investors. At that time, the government, the policymakers, were saying there can be a supply problem. So they were pushing investors, or saying, or let's say encouraging the investors to invest in such power plants, where we were saying the opposite. And now at the moment, the policymakers and the government, let's say, think there is oversupply and trust too much this oversupply. Now we encourage the other part, the government, the policymakers side, not to trust too much the oversupply. We can have now our models. At that time, our models were saying, no, there is overcapacity, no problem of supply security. Now the opposite. There can be supply security. This supply security is not, there are a lot of types of supply security. I'm not talking about yearly average, but I'm talking about the flexible supply problem, the balancing supply problem. There can be. We see this in our models because now it's a very stochastic process with a lot of renewables. Compared to our 10 years ago model, it's a very stochastic process. and we can model stochastically, and we can see short-term supply problem probabilities, let's say, can occur in the upcoming years. So there can be some recommendations for this, but the most important one is the price cap. Unfortunately, we have a very limited price cap, which is the first thing that we should go back to 2,000 lira or higher, according to our models, to encourage also flexible generation while encouraging renewable generation. That is what I want to say for now. Sorry if I was long.
Thank you very much, Mr. Korkmaz. Before walking away from the subject a little bit further, there is a question I want to ask to Armin, if you can just briefly answer that. Mr. Muzaffer Basharan is asking if the pump storage is not more feasible than even the open OCGTs.
For pump storages, again, the situation has two dimensions. First dimension, of course, you need suitable sites, and it's getting harder and harder to find sites which also can comply with environmental concerns. So this is the potential side, which can be a limiting factor, but there might be still some suitable sites that you can find. And the other side, the problem is you need a price spread in the market for the pump storages, and the problem is looking at very flat price duration curves. I learned from Ozan that there is a chance that we can have, because of the special design in the auxiliary markets, we might have a little bit an inclination on the higher price side. Still, the spread is not in so many hours significantly open, and that can be a problem for new pump storages, which of course is a long-term investment, but needs significant money to reinvest this, to reimburse this investment. So although for the renewables this might be bad, if you add more renewables, you can see some hours where prices are dropping, maybe even to zero. And this is excellent for the pump storage, actually, because then you can pump for free or just paying grid fees. This would be a booster for the pump storages. If the renewables are in the range that we've shown in our two scenarios, for the pump storages, it is a little bit of a problem. Because the investment is higher, for example, compared to the very low end of the batteries, assuming that they will decline, as we heard in the previous session.
Okay. Can I also add one more thing? Because we not recently, maybe 2 years ago, we did a market study for a potential pump hydro. So it is the most important thing, as Mr. Armin mentioned, we need more renewables, and with more renewables, more stochastic process in the price formation, we may see low and high prices. But first, we need a good design also for our balancing market. Our balancing market design is a little bit old now. It's not backing up today's renewable capacity. It cannot back up also tomorrow's additional renewable capacity. So we need them. After those suitable market design, the most important parameter for pump storage is the fuel price, is the gas price. If gas prices are very high, yeah, of course, pump storage can be feasible. But with the current and foreseeable future gas prices, I don't think it will be more feasible than open cycle gas turbines.
Okay, thank you very much for the excellent explanations. Now I want to turn to Holger and ask another point of view question. Holger, in the last 10-15 years, you have evaluated Turkish energy markets as corporate executives.
Yes.
What are the major differences of Turkish power market story then and now? Can you please make a comparison for us?
Sure, and actually, it's a very, very good question. I mean, first of all, what pops off in my head, and that was mentioned here a few times, it's gas prices. So we've learned that gas prices are still very relevant. I mean, we've seen that from Armin's presentation. OCGTs, CCGTs mainly are setting the price. Ozan mentioned that for pump storage. So gas prices, that's actually not a difference. Gas prices have been important and will be important. The big difference here is when I recall me and my colleagues sitting there together and discussing the development of gas prices 15 years ago, it was a discussion of potash, it was a discussion of Gazprom, it was a discussion of LTCs and the right formula. And basically gas price forecasting was nothing else but an oil price forecast and translating that into a gas price. So I think this paradigm has completely shifted now. All of a sudden, we're talking spot prices, we're talking about fundamentals, we're talking about LNG, we're talking about recent developments of upstream, and we're talking about more or less convergence to the TTF and the speed of convergence from the Turkish spot market to the TTF. So I think this rationale of relevant gas prices, this has changed dramatically. And all of a sudden, we are exposed to, say, the natural boom and bust cycles that the gas market comes with. So currently, it's a low price. However, we've seen that back and forth. People will stop investing. Gas prices will. Hey, this is nice music. So gas price, people will stop investing. Gas prices will increase again. So all of a sudden, all that boom and bust cycle from the global gas market will be incorporated into the Turkish power market. So I think that's maybe the most prominent one. The other thing I can think of is maybe Turkish demand. I mean, ever since when we talk about Turkish demand, it's bullish, and 15 years ago it couldn't be even more bullish. There was no skepticism at all. I don't know. I'm still bullish for Turkish demand. However, nowadays I would strongly recommend to add some non-bullish or not so bullish sensitivities into the forecast, just to have a glimpse on that as well. And maybe the last one, but I think this is obvious, it's renewables. I mean, when we talked about renewables 15 years ago, that was purely hydro. It was about hydro dispatch, strategic bidding, dry year, wet year. And all of a sudden, I mean, not to that extent that we seen it in Europe, and Armin mentioned that before, but even nowadays, renewables, wind, PV, they play an important role in the Turkish market as well. And depending on the development of this of course interacts with the market. So it's not only relevant from an investor's point of view, but it's also relevant from a pricing point of view, because as we all know, the more renewables enter the market, the more impact that will have on prices. So it will decrease prices, of course, and hence that has a tremendous impact on other investment decisions. Like, for instance, it's quite negative for gas plants as well as for renewables itself, with a cannibalizing effect. However, it might have quite a positive impact, as Armin said, for storage, for batteries and PSV. So I think this is also a new factor that one has to understand compared to the discussions we had 15 years ago.
Okay, thank you very much for the insights.
You're welcome.
Servet, we have listened from foreign investors' point of view. Can you imagine a brand new attractive energy story for Turkey, or what should we change?
Thanks a lot, actually, for the question. Yeah, I mean, before I even start answering to that, I just have to share that it really feels good again to start discussing fundamentals about the market, because I think it had been already quite a long time that we were always talking about more sentimental or politics related stuff for Turkish Power. But I'm really glad that the last 30 minutes or so we were going into the real hardcore fundamental stuff. So really thanks a lot for all the panelists for that. So I mean, when it comes to a story for a market, the very first thing we might think of is this demand growth. And I think although it's even halved compared to last decade or so, 4%, 5% of growth expectation is still a very strong start for any good story. But of course, I mean, in order to make this story decent and sound nice, we need, again, some clarity and certainty about how or what sort of a roadmap we will be having in front of us, especially when it comes to adding further renewable capacities to the system. Because what we have today is a very successful YEKDEM story, which doesn't have any step backs, which actually have also enabled a lot of capacities being online, but we don't know afterwards. And yesterday there was also a panel about that, and I mean, we all those panelists, including myself, we all know the market, but nobody really knows what is going to come. Of course, there are a lot of theories, but still, it's already late. It's already due, and we need some sort of clarity on how the capacities will be auctioned and so on. Again, I mean, when it comes to this CCGT and gas to power discussion, I also see this long-term interesting picture in terms of price curve, and this is of course making me feel a bit of a deja vu for some 10 years ago. And of course it's a nice thing, it's a nice story, because the models, the numbers, the figures are showing some sort of demand, some sort of potential investment indication in there. So that's of course one interesting development. But now, of course, it's a totally different world, and now we need sound market designs which incentivize flexibility, short-term market realities, and of course the reliability of the system. And this will not come with a bailout type of capacity support mechanism. It will only come if we sit together and design something for a proper capacity auctioning mechanism, if we are going to go to capacity market too. But the one we have currently today is it's just a very rushing type of mechanism which doesn't help anyone. So, and of course, for all that to happen, I think we need a great reset. This is a fancy term these days, of course, as you know. We need a great reset also for the trading part of the business, or the trading part segment of the business, not only for retail but also for wholesale, because we already have so much traumas over the last decade, I would say, in terms of market liquidity going up and down because of some non-market solutions, market interventions, and so on. But of course, I mean, now the market still has a very good chance and very interesting and potentially bright future ahead. So with the upcoming legislation on the API side, bringing the central clearing party and so on, I think we need to use this chance much more wisely than before. So, but again, I mean, when it comes to models, I mean, my colleagues and my friends, they know me that I'm a personal non-believer in any power modeling ahead of 5 years. I mean, even 3 years is, I think, very much questionable. But again, we all know that, again, we need to have something for those exam models, right? And this is the whole starting point of a discussion. But when I have compared my gut feeling, my stomach feeling regarding the price curve, before we have started together to discuss this model with Armin and Holger, I was, for some reason, really bearish. So I was thinking, well, we don't really have any really interesting stories to go above 40, 45 euros or so. And of course, the underlying reason for that is, of course, going through this German Energiewende and seeing all these things going the other way around. And then we put the model, and then we've seen all these numbers popping up. Then this was a very good wake-up call for me to step back and look back the last 2 years in Germany, what was really happening again. Because like 4 or 5 years ago, over here, the thermal power plants were all, you know, in especially high efficiency CCGTs, they were really not working at all. And now with the increasing carbon price, increasing spark spreads and so on, now we see they're coming back. So again, I mean, we are seeing a very similar shape, only with a time difference between Turkey and Germany. And I in all my business doing, I'm always making use of this time arbitrage between German and Turkish markets anyway. So I'm sure that this will be repeating in the future. So from that perspective, I think one important issue is we know that in the past there was a lot of overshooting for price forecasting and so on in Turkey, and that was also, Ozan was also mentioning that this was coming from the government reports showing a deficit and so on. And of course, I mean, business developers love those deficit stories, so everyone wants to get into that game. That was a gold rush in gas plants. So, but of course, that has already created a bit of a paranoia about overshooting things. And now what we see is, in some models I'm also seeing, and as I said, in my personal gut feeling model, I was already very much undershooting the things now. So probably if we don't really switch that thinking a little bit, we might be having some further difficulties in the grid management and grid reliability in the long run. But again, coming back to the story or the upcoming, hopefully bright outlook, I am just hoping that we don't really go for further non-market solutions in this market. So whenever we are close to the market-friendly solutions, and in this case, maybe I can give an example. Now we're again talking about, okay, what sort of a feed-in tariff it will be for the renewables in the future. In the future, as in 6 months, it will be just expiring. Looking at those numbers, do we really need a feed-in tariff at all for wind and solar? We don't. We just need sound capacity allocation mechanisms for project development and further renewable stack. That's the whole thing. And we can, of course, follow the Spanish way, for example. They are very good at that. They have already created such a nice story. We could just follow to add that. So, for example, again, when it comes to gas, Holger was saying that, well, now the hope to converge to the market-related structure is much higher or much bigger, but contracts are expiring, and we don't even know how or what sort of a market price or reference price creation will be here in this market. So the only urge or the only wish I could just share in terms of not really deteriorating the story for the future would be basically just let the market decide on how it is gonna pay its way. But I'm not saying that not leave the market alone, but I know that I would say almost 40-50% of why we are today in terms of market inefficiencies and market interventions, 40-50% of that is coming from the, let's say, uncalculated or miscalculated behavior of the private sector too. So although there was a bit of a wrong guidance from the regulatory authority or the state, but there was also a lot of wrong calculation, wrong feasibilities, which took us all the way to this point. So we should just now let, for example, if the market wants things to be consolidated, we should just let it happen, for example. So let the market forces pave the way for forward, because all the other fundamentals, all the other necessities which we already have, all that ingredients for successful markets in the future.
Okay, thank you very much, Servet. We listened to another pro-marketist. That's good to hear, actually, with some solution proposals. Actually, there are quite a few good ideas about auctioning capacity, etc., which should be taken into consideration. I want to return to Mr. Ozan Korkmaz, but we are a little bit over on our time. So I'll ask you if you can be as short as possible on that. You mentioned about some deficiencies on the balancing market design, and we talk in this panel a lot about spot prices, but we know that there is a permeability between their prices and ancillary services. They can affect each other. Do you think the balancing market prices are calculated correctly in Turkey? If not, as you already said, actually, what are the effects and overheads on the market players? And lastly, do you have a proposal for a different design? I think your microphone is muted.
Sorry. This, I was saying, this should be a separate discussion. It's not a topic to discuss. I just can say, discuss for 5 minutes, 5 minutes. I just want to say, our balancing market, there are two things: balancing market prices and imbalance penalties. So what I would like to say is also the ancillary services. There are 3 dimensions of this topic. What we see is every year TSO, TIH, RTIH tariff cost for power plants is increasing significantly. Why? Because of the let's say, how to say this politically, because of a wrong market design for this. Ancillary services, okay, we were advising TSO for that design, but it was needed to do something, and at that moment we had to begin with that. But this is now 3 years of that design. We may alter some things. The balancing power market prices, let's say our tertiary reserve, or MFRR, as you say in the European markets, it's set to be in the regulation, is set to be a marginal price, pay as clear based calculation for the price, but because it's a 1 hour, first, the 1 hour time, settlement time is a lot for the balancing market. We have to decrease that. Secondly, having those auctions day ahead at 4 o'clock is not needed. We may change that also to a continuous dimension, as many European countries did. Thirdly, we have to, if we are sticking in 1 hour market, then we have to have two prices, the loading price and the deloading price, because within 1 hour there are changes and we cannot find the real marginal price if we go with one single balancing price. For the imbalance price, many European countries add ancillary services cost, because it is a balancing cost actually, to the imbalance penalties. So we should also add that. With this, what will happen? With this, renewable power plants will be more eager to do better forecasts and do more in intraday markets. Aggregators will look for VPP solutions, and maybe they will redispatch some dispatchable power plants inside their portfolio. But today, all operation is on the shoulders of the TSO. TSO's cost is increasing geometrically, significantly, because they cannot take that cost from the real causers of the problem. And then all the power plants in the market should they see higher increasing TSO tariffs, which they cannot control, and maybe they cannot forecast. This is also a problem in front of the new investments, because there is a real unpredictability in the cost of TSO. How much next year? How much the other year? Last year it was 8 lira. This year it is 15 lira. The per megawatt hour term increased by nearly 100%. So we need a new market design. What I propose is to have, if we have a 1 hour market, if we have to continue with that technically, then we have to have a dual pricing in balancing market, real marginal pricing. and then we should add a component from ancillary services cost to the dual imbalance prices. The current formula can be taken out, and this type of a new formula can be placed. And because of doing this, we can also take out that KAGÜP penalties. We can only have one imbalance penalty after such a design. So this is what I think in my mind, but I think this is a separate discussion. We can elaborate on this for more than an hour. So I should stop now.
Thank you very much. So I also give a good picture about the effects and what can be enhanced on this side. Actually, we are approaching to 4 p.m. limit that given to us. So there was a last questions about the long-term trends and challenges for the power markets. If anyone of you wants to say some keywords about that, we can listen, or otherwise we can finish the panel.
If I can just add a sentence as a closing remark, at least on my side. Well, actually, if there are two long-term trends or outlooks to be really worried or let's say to work on, first of all, I think the very first one is we have to solve this renewable capacity additions issue. We have to incentivize that, and we have to clarify how this is going to be in the future. And we have to solve our own dilemma between the renewable expansion and incentivizing coal. So we have to fix that dilemma by one way or other, because they don't fit into the same basket, right? So second, the whole electrification and the management of that electrification, which some points Ozan just was mentioning about the management of real-time or close to real-time markets. There are a lot of solution sets to this issue, and I fully agree with those statements. So we just need to make that market design work, and we have to take that burden out of the TSO so that more and more renewables can integrate to the grid, because it's not only that we just grant capacity rights and put those wind turbines and solar panels, it's more the management of that. And of course, there's a lot of work to do on this. So I guess if I were to choose two topics, the way how we go further with renewables in terms of capacity additions, and how are we going to manage this whole electrification and further renewable management story. Thank you.
Okay.
Maybe one final or two final comments from me, Jem, if I still have time. So Sarah said that he doesn't believe forecasting models, and I fully agree. So by no means forecasting models can take away the uncertainty. However, I purely believe that they can make the uncertainty visible, and that you can have an educated guess when you do an investment. And the other one, if it comes to the political framework, I mean, I've seen energy-only markets, I've seen capacity markets, I've seen energy-only energy-only markets that claim to be the other thing. Every kiosk here. I think the crucial part for investors is that they ensure their property rights, and it's a kind of stability in the political decision. So uncertainty of a political decision is killing any investments, and also especially if you do that, and if the plans are not written off, that cause so many issues in Germany, all over the world. So I think the people can live with any kind of framework if it's sustainable. I think this is a crucial takeaway from my experience.
Yes, thank you. I want to thank to all the audience before closing the panel, and also I want to thank the participants for the valuable insights. Thank you for attending.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Have a nice weekend, everyone.
Bye-bye.